Read a book called Invisible Gaps. Take the meaning from that book and learn it and live it. Basically, it tells you that you don't know everything and that there are 1,000 things that you don't know, including invisible gaps in a startup journey. If your dad's not Rockefeller or Trump, if you didn't go to Harvard and meet a bunch of rich kids with rich parents, if you're like me and you went to a state school and you never had money in your life, not substantial money, you don't have the lessons that rich people have learned before you. Trump doesn't build towers without Trump Sr., because Trump Sr. built a real estate empire, lost and learned throughout that 100 years of doing that, and transferred that invisible knowledge to his child.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Ryan Bostick. And Ryan went to school at college initially at a party school, but did get a degree and graduated, and then did his first startup working in sales in his 20s, and then started a barreview.com, and also sold cold or spring and winter break trips, and started springbreak.com. Sold the startups for a small amount of money, and then decided to go into work for corporate for a period of time. Hated his job, started reading some business books, saw a flaw in the marketplace that made him take the leap to his own business, and then launched findingfasteners.com, and now is also building that out in the same concept in a few other verticals. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely excited to have you on. So I just gave a condensed version to a much longer journey, but maybe unwinding, rewinding, and unpacking a bit. Tell us a little bit about how your journey got started, going off to college and partying a bit.
Yeah, I came home from school and I worked at a bar because that's what I'd done in my small college town in Nacogdoches, Texas, which has a bit of a cult-like drinking mentality at a school called SFA. That anybody familiar with the March Madness every year, they're typically in the first couple rounds. Sometimes they've made it a little further. They beat Duke 2 years ago, so that's their big claim to fame. But great school, amazing relationships that you built. A lot of the people that come out of that school are highly productive because it was so hard to graduate amidst all the the nightly activities. But I worked for a company for about 3 years, got some real hardcore sales training, really knew at that point in my life that I really didn't want to work for anyone else. And so I tried to quit that day job and go launch a business. One was focused on spring break destinations with local advertising, and the other was focused on the local bar community that I was still a big part of, and did pretty well. But at 28, 27, coming out of school from a party school, I was nowhere near ready to be, I don't want to use the word adult, but running my own business with no one standing over me, making sure I got everything done every day was not a good fit. So I sold both those businesses, both those websites, with active ad clients on each for a modest amount of money. Basically,
one question on that. So, I mean, see, you started those. Now, you were doing a sales job at the time. Were these side hustles, or were you doing these full time? And
I went full time, so I had a decent bonus, and then the second year of that sales job, it was enough for me to kind of pay my rent for 3-4 months. This was back when I didn't own anything. My car was paid for, my insurance was cheap. The most expensive thing I paid for was cable. And so it was a lot easier at that age to launch these businesses and self-sustain myself. Being good at sales came in handy. I was able to go down, especially on the spring break locations, and close hotels for, $1,000 ad, a $1,500 ad. I'd go down to South Padre or Panama City for a week. as a 27-year-old, getting to go to the beach for a week and talk to bars and hotel owners was pretty easy, and came out of it with ad clients. And we did a magazine along with the website, so the magazine would get published, and we put those out for 2 spring breaks in a row. It's basically, where to stay next year, but more importantly, what to do while you're here. You would think that that already existed, but the hotels jumped right on it. Like, they just seemed to be really focused on advertising, and we were asking such a little amount. Average magazine ad could be as much as $25,000, and here comes this 26-year-old kid that's got a really pretty example of a magazine. He seems to talk bar really well. He seems to talk spring break really well, and it just seemed to line up. So yeah, I did that for about 2.5 years. I picked up a partner along the way. That was my first intro to partnerships, and kind of reading the fine print of who you're partnering with, and make sure that their income is not solely derived from poker rooms that they have secretly all over the city. And there's a lot of lessons learned in that partnership. But yeah, I was able to sell them, and I went to work. I went and got a day job. I got my first corporate sales job.
And what made you, just out of curiosity, because I mean, you said, you'd started out in sales, decided, hey, I really want to do my own thing, started the businesses, got some revenue, brought on a partner. What made you decide to sell those off and go back to corporate and work for corporate for a period of time?
The partnership was not as it had been proposed. It was kind of, you go out and keep selling and keep doing what you're doing, and we'll cover all the operating costs. And that lasted for about a month. And when it wasn't coming in as fast as they had hoped, they started to question even paying me. So it became a struggle that I just wasn't willing to go through. And there was some shadiness that came in with it. It was, that when you find out that the guy that you thought owned a couple car lots really makes his income from underground poker rooms across the city, and you're picking up paychecks, you're picking up money from his poker rooms, it just started to get weird. And there was an opportunity to sell it, and he didn't want to run it, and he didn't want to keep it, so he was fine selling it. We split it. I think we sold both websites for $60,000, so it wasn't like anybody made a lot of money. And I was ready to go work. I needed some guidance. I knew it where I was in life. I needed to learn the corporate structure. I needed to learn a lot more. So I went and worked for people for 20 years, and circled back around to it in my 40s.
So now, as you started to mention it, but as you go and now work for others, for work corporate, you say, for 20 years, what did you go into, or what did you do for that period of time?
I had 2 jobs, essentially, both high-level sales roles. I was typically given either a regional territory or a market. The first job was very regional. I had the Southeast United States and the Southeast, or the Northeast of North America, so from Toronto all the way to Quebec. So I started to get my international experience in, albeit Canada. The second job was working for Stanley Black & Decker for a decade. I ran their fastening efforts in a lot of cold markets, from EV to construction to oil and gas, pretty much anything. I put the 2 screws in the bottom of your iPhone with our design team, stuff like that. But it was 2 different worlds. One was a family-owned business. The second, Stanley, was obviously a brick and mortar, corporate ran, corporate structured, balance sheet minded effort. And I learned a lot of what I don't want in a business through that. Corporate layoffs, corporate decisions that just seemed short-sighted during a pandemic, or during a Trump tariff war. This kind of stuff that happened in the last 5 years of my job were definite eye-openers for me, that I don't like working in this environment. I don't think it's a conducive environment to innovation and or growth. And the more I worked there and the more books I read, the more I realized I wanted to work for myself again.
So now you say, okay, and there's a difference. I definitely get, wanting to work for yourself, taking the time period during or during life to work for corporate, whether that's get experience, have a steady income, and otherwise, get that under your belt. Now, as you're starting to read those books, kind of, it sounds like maybe putting words in your mouth, but, get the itch to kind of go back out on your own and do your own business again, and kind of make that leap again. How did you figure out what that was going to be, or, what that might look like?
I really started to look at what I was doing for the company in the last 3 to 5 years. I had been been known as the lone wolf that if you put me in a cold market, I would generate a business for you from either scratch or take an existing moderate business and grow that to an exponential size.
Hmm.
And as I was doing that, I'd kind of gotten off the corporate ladder track. I was no longer, for the first 5 years, I was in that get on a director path, get on a VP path. Had I gone that route, maybe I'd still be there, maybe I wouldn't. But because I was kind of hitting my head at the top, nobody wanted to pull me out of my role because of the business that I would generate. They would give me a team more often than not, but it was just me and 10 to 15 lateral reports, meaning they all worked for someone else, but they were supporting me on a large project. And the job had gotten fairly easy, and I got kind of stuck in a rut, if you will. But at some point, I started, right or wrong, throughout the pandemic. That's where a lot of us got disgruntled. That's where the teams that were supporting us got laid off. I was already on a track. I'd read a book called Exponential Organizations. Ironically, the company made us read it. And as you're reading it, it's talking about balance sheet decisions and the effects of balance sheet decisions. And it's really was a book that says don't run your business like Stanley Black and Decker, but here it is. The company gives it to you and tells you to read it. So my head was already in a place where I was questioning a lot of people at corporate environments either accept what the company does and ignore it, or they get too involved in it, too worried about it, and it drives them nuts. Well, I was the latter. I
Hmm.
was also closing very large deals, and right or wrong, call it greed, call it I want what I'm owed. I started to get that feeling, which for a salesperson is never good.
Hmm.
Feeling that no matter what they paid you, it wasn't enough. If you made six-figure salaries, but you're closing multi-million-dollar orders, you start to question, am I working at the right place? And that was driving me more than anything. I wanted a better future for my family. My wife and I are very passionate with a lot of charities, and the only way that we could support them the way I want to, which is to donate the things they need, is to make more money. So I altruistically, greedily, whichever way you want to put it, I was tired of closing multi-million-dollar deals towards the end and seeing the market that I was building for my employer and not seeing an exponential increase in what I made annually.
Makes sense. And as I said, I think sometimes you have the itch, the desire to go do your own thing, yet you see a path that you can do it. You also are getting worn out with the current position, and it kind of all culminates together and makes sense. So you decide, okay, I'm going to go out on my own. I've read these books. I've kind of got that itch again. I'm kind of wanting to do something different. I think I can do it better, different, quicker, faster, whatever you want to call it. So where did you decide to dive off, and how did you figure out where you're going to go to start to do your own business?
Well, for 10 years, I'd called on mechanical designers. I started off my career with the Halliburtons, Schlumbergers, the NOVs of the world, so oil and gas, topside and downhole. The company would eventually move me into trucking, ag, and construction, which was Caterpillar, John Deere, Kenworth, and Daimler Truck. So I got to know that market fairly well. I slowly started to move into EV and solar in my fifth year, and that's what I did for the last 5 years that I was with the company. But in every market, I dealt with mechanical designers, the people that put your products together, whether it's the phone in your pocket, the car you drive, or the house you live in, that somebody puts that together in a mechanical design. Well, these mechanical engineers for years have been leaning on me and my competitors as their brand experts, and they do that because in their 4 year degree from A&M or U of M or Penn State, wherever they got an ME degree, they're taught about a week's worth of education on fasteners, welds, and glues. The problem is every single product in the world today, from a phone to a chair, is put together with a fastener, a weld, or a glue. So they got a 4 year degree that teach them 5 thermodynamics classes, but doesn't teach them a mechanical joint as a mechanical engineer. And so they would lean on us brand experts. Well, Stanley was laying off the brand experts at an exponential rate, like from the trade wars that happened the 4 years prior to the pandemic. They're a commodities company. They make plastic and metal parts. When there's a $100 million tariff that hits you because of your plastic ordering out of China, you cut back and you cut back. And then a pandemic hits and you were already cut back and you cut back some more. Well, who do they cut back? They cut back the older veterans that knew everything. So these engineers, my competitors all did the same thing. Now they got nowhere to go and they're left up to their own devices, which is they pick on their own. So long story short, I knew there was a problem with design engineering, and it was often centered around fasteners, welds, or glues. And I knew there was a way to make that better. I had no idea what that looked like. I fumbled with a website for about 2 years, and towards about a year before I quit my day job, I met an old colleague that had been laid off by Stanley. He worked for one of the brands for 35 years, was kind of the mad scientist of that brand. I told him what I was trying to do, and he went, I have an idea for you. And he had built kind of an access database on Lotus in 1997. And most of the people listening is called Lotus was the spreadsheet before Excel. So before Excel existed, before Google Sheets existed, you used Lotus. And so he had built the background of what we would eventually build for our product on a Lotus spreadsheet. We spent about a year and a half converting that, and a year into that, I quit my day job and launched that product full time.
No, sounds like it was a good journey. So now, so you say, okay, figured it out, got the partner, got the, worked out the details of what you're going to do in the business, and decided to jump over and do that full time. Now, how did it go? I mean, sometimes you make the leap and you instantly regret it, and you find out it was a bad decision. Other times you say, hey, this is what I loved and what I should have been doing this 10 years earlier. Sometimes it takes off like a rocket ship. Sometimes you teeter on the brink of bankruptcy, and anywhere in between. So walk us through a little bit as you made the leap over and decided to, do that full time, kind of how that played out or what that looked like.
Yeah, one of my biggest mistakes as a founder was leaping too quick. I definitely would say be careful how fast you leap. I was leaping as a grown up, and I don't mean to put it that way, but I had real life bills, real life debt, and when you leap, you typically add more debt. So I launched my company with no credit card debt. Within 6 months of launching, I had every credit card I owned, including my spouse's, were loaded up. So there were a million things I didn't know what I didn't know that I could have been working on for a whole nother year with a paid salary. My wife still working enough almost to cover the 3 full-time employees that we had we moved home to Texas and done it the right way, moved in with family, not gotten a new home. There's a million things we did in that first year that have been much better suited had I had not quit my day job. But one way or another, we launched. I learned the hard way that even SBA loan, we were looking for a working capital loan. We had 800 credit score. We checked every box. They signed off on our business plan. They loved everything we were doing. We had clients interested with letters of intent, and they loved everything. The last question they asked during the SBA loan process is, does anybody in the house have a W-2? Well, both my wife and I had quit our day jobs to launch this business. She would eventually launch her own floral business separately, but in the first year, she's working with me. So no W-2s in the house. I asked the loan officer, Shark Tank style, don't I need to quit my day job to be running this business? Same question every shark ever gets on that stupid show. And their answer was, no, we would have preferred you stay working. So even the SBA loan was thwarted because I quit my day job too early. But, here we are. We launched the business. We spent about a year kind of fumbling with the business model. We had launched a product on a website. It was basically a virtual expert. We started with fasteners, but it applied to anything. If you were looking to buy a washing machine, I would ask you, how many kids do you have in the house? How many kids are under the age of 5? Or any of the kids playing sports? If they are, which sports are they playing? How many times a week do you do laundry? What's your average size load? How many stains do you deal with? I would have done a qualification of what you wanted with that washing machine versus me just going to Home Depot and picking the one with the cool buttons. So we had built this virtual expert because we were experts in fastening. We were able to build it. Now we're building beyond that, but we built them all on a master database, 15 million rows deep, 18,000 columns with a very nice UX in front of it that allows you to search and waterfall to an answer. That was great, but it was fasteners, and nobody in my world ever values fasteners until they fail. So there's a Rivian recall of 18,000 trucks with a bolt. Nobody cares about the fasteners. Then they care. And the problem, we were approaching it the wrong way. Once we realized what we were building was a PLM software tool add-on, like the whole world changed, because we got off of fasteners and got on to mistakes that cause cost, and that causes consultants. And once we figured all that out, we had a viable product that people now sign up for readily, easily.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like, it took a bit of iteration, bit of evolution of the company, but you guys kind of figured out what the real need you were solving, where the expertise could be best leveraged, and led it to a great business. So catch us up a bit to where things are at today. I think you still have findingfasteners.com. You've expanded into other verticals, but kind of walk us through where's the business at today, and where's it headed?
Yeah, so we launched with Finding Plastics, and originally I had this whole product scheme: finding plastics, finding fasteners, finding clips, finding torque. It still kind of had that path of products, but now they're all just housed in one website. So we launched Finding Engineered Solutions. So as we go into a Rivian or a John Deere or a Ford or an Apple, depending on who the mechanical designer that group is that we're calling on, they all have different pain points. We start with fasteners and torque. That seems to be one of the biggest issues, at least on the automotive side where we're at today. But because of what we built, as long as they have in-house expertise and we can find an outside consultant, say for glues, I went to a glue company that sells all the adhesives to most of the automotive market and said, hey, do you mind partnering with us on a glue calculator? We then go internal to the OEM and we're able to say, all right, what's all the glued solutions you have as a company? Which type of glue is in each solution? What do we know? That glue doesn't work in an e-bag. That glue doesn't work in this. And we lay all those parameters out for the spreadsheet. And their expert and my expert come in and sign off that for these set of solutions, everything in here is valid. And so we can now add glues and bumpers, and if they are using 67 different types of tail lights for a Ford F-150, we can build a qualifying tool around those tail lights that makes the mechanical designer's job easier when he's selecting a new tail light. And then purchasing has become our new best friend, because what happens in a lot of new programs, especially EV, is designers will work in a silo. So 15 guys or gals are sitting next to each other designing the same parts of a car, say the outside of a car, the screen of an iPhone. They're all on that one team that designs the screen. And they have different applications all the way around that screen. Well, they all may be the same, but in a new program, they're not turning to the right and saying, hey, do you have something similar here? What would you use? Basically common parts that were already used on the old iPhone, already used on the old F-150. They're in the system, but SAP makes it really hard to search through those parts in an intelligent way. So purchasing loves us because we force design not to get a new part. They have to take a part from the current kitty. And when they do that, it reduces the amount of parts they buy as a company, and it allows purchasing to maximize the cost per part.
No, I think that sounds like it's been a good area, different areas to expand in, solving lots of problems, and otherwise building out the business to service the needs of the clientele. So that sounds like an awesome place to be. So, well, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of the journey, even looking a little bit as to where it's headed, great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
For me, it was twofold. It was the decision to launch too early, and I highlighted the details that I learned from that. The second one was a gap that I didn't know I have, which is my second point that I'll make. But I thought I had sales locked down. I'd been a 20-year salesperson. This is going to be the part of the company that's the easiest for me. I know how to sell products better than anyone. I went into it fairly arrogantly. I knew how to sell physical products with a handshake. Here's the bolt for your solution. Here's the headlight that you needed. I did not know how to sell software sales, and I learned the hard way for the first year and a half that it was a very different type of sale, and it was something that I had to go out and seek help on.
Hmm. No, and it makes sense, and it's one where I think you get used to, or you get expertise in a given industry, and you think it's equally applicable. And there are certainly transferable skills, a lot of things that you can or do, but figuring out those differences and how you adapt and how you have to adjust is certainly an easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from.
Right.
Second question now that I always ask is, now if you talk to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Read a book called Invisible Gaps. Take the meaning from that book and learn it and live it. Basically, it tells you that you don't know everything and that there are 1,000 things that you don't know, including invisible gaps in a startup journey. If your dad's not Rockefeller or Trump, if you didn't go to Harvard and meet a bunch of rich kids with rich parents, if you're like me and you went to a state school and you never had money in your life, not substantial money, you don't have the lessons that rich people have learned before you. Trump doesn't build towers without Trump Sr., because Trump Sr. built a real estate empire, lost and learned throughout that 100 years of doing that, and transferred that invisible knowledge to his child. I didn't have that in life, and that book taught me to look for those gaps. The amount of times in a startup journey that you will be shocked at something you didn't know and how much it affects your future path will amaze most people. So for me, it's understanding invisible gaps and seeking to close them through mentors, through colleagues. If you don't know finance, if you don't have a financial intelligence, which is required, I did not, you read Venture Deals, the book, and you go find a mentor that can help you through the funding process, help you through the bank setup process, help you through the tax attorney process, help you through the software sales process. Closing those invisible gaps is for me the number one thing that I would recommend to any startup.
No, I think that's definitely a great piece of advice and a great takeaway. Well, now as we are wrapping up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, just reach out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I'm on there daily, unfortunately. As the marketing head of our small little startup, I get to make posts daily. So I live on LinkedIn about as much as some people live on Facebook. So reach out. Devin has my information. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat for whatever your needs are.
Hey, I definitely encourage everybody to reach out, support a great business, become a customer, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So thank you again, Ryan, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us share these journeys with even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And last but not least, if you ever need help along your journey with any startup or with your startup or small business with any patent or trademark needs, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Ryan, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.